either between slates, roof tiles, and there's cladding systems like standing seam or zinc. And
Dave the Builder on KFM with Premier Timber Frame Homes, your expert guide to self-built homes. PremierTimberFrameHomes.ie.
Dave McManus of Premier Timber Frame Homes is with us in studio again for week 5 of our building slot. Morning to you, Dave. Hope you were all right coming in on the roads this morning. They're quite bad, weren't they?
Yeah, pretty bad this morning. Now we got a good drop of rain last night, but got here safely, thankfully.
Good stuff. Yeah, we'll update people on traffic very shortly, because I know the main commuter routes, the M4, M4 and the M7, N7 were bad this morning. But bring us up to date then on where we are, Dave. We're talking about our made-up couple of John and Mary, who have gone through the planning process. They've organised all their finances. They've put in the foundations now for their house. They want to know what the next step is for building their timber frame home. Yeah, absolutely. So usually what happens around this time is they'd be due a payment from the mortgage company. So if they didn't already give the timber frame company a deposit, now would be the time. And that's when John and Mary are going to get down to the nitty gritty of stuff that they're going to be buying a lot of. They're going to be buying the house, the windows, the doors, the roof. Different timber frame companies offer different packages. For instance, we'd offer a weather tight package, so the windows, the doors, the roof, the insulation package, the air tightness package, etc, etc. So I'm going to run through that kind of sit down scenario with John and Mary. They'd kind of come into us, we'd sit down in the office and we'd run through what kind of roof they wanted. Now obviously they would have known. The architect might have said, or sometimes they have a choice, but sometimes the county council would say, look, well, you need slates in this area, or you need tiles in this area. So if they do have a choice, they can pick either between slates, roof tiles, and there's cladding systems like standing seam or zinc. And at the end of the day, more than likely it's going to look like a black roof, unless you're really particular. But the standing seam is quite nice these days. It's a high-end finish, Moving on from there, the windows and doors is a big topic when it comes to building your own home. And it's usually the feature of your house. You know what I mean? The different types of windows and doors on the market today, you have probably 70 to 80% of people are buying PVC windows and doors. So probably, when the timber window went out in the late 80s, 90s, the PVC one came in. Obviously PVC doesn't rot, so it's great. And they have a really low U value as well. So that's obviously great for your heat loss in your house. You can do loads of different styles. You can have a normal casement window which opens in and out like a door of a house, and then you have a tilt and turn. If you buy a tilt and turn in Ireland, it's kind of a step up, whereas if you buy them from the continent, they're actually a standard window on the continent, Right. Can you decide where to put the windows then in the house, or has that already been sorted with your planning application?
That would have been sorted with your planning application. Now, you probably would have a bit to say in regards to what way they open and what way the movement on the window is,
Right, okay. If anyone has any questions, by the way, send them in to us and we'll ask Dave at the end, because I know one has already come in from Gemma in Kildare town, and she wants to know what's the best type of roof to put on the house. You've touched on this already, and really I suppose it kind of depends, does it? Yeah, so I suppose cost effectively roof tiles are the most cost effective, and right across the country, Roadstone sell them, Breeden, there's Quinn tiles up the north, they're a black concrete roof tile. They're a good job, and they last the test of time. They probably, in regards to sound or acoustic, they let the least amount of sound through into your house. But once your insulation is in place in your attic, it doesn't really matter what you put on the roof in regards to sound, So after that, it is really an aesthetic view is what you're looking for. Now, I see a lot of people, and even on all the modern houses, the zinc is quite popular now at the moment, It is a kind of a zinc style. It is a kind of a tin, if you like, but as I say,
if you have your insulation incorrectly, the sound won't come through, you know.
Okay, you were talking about windows there. Is it kind of similar then procedure with the doors? A lot of people going for maybe PVC doors, or what's the difference between the windows and the doors?
So basically, you have... Look, you probably have 4 different types that's commonly used. You have PVC, you have aluminium, you have alu-clad, and you have your traditional wood. Now, alu-clad is a timber window with aluminium on the outside of it, right? And the aluminium is basically to stop the timber getting weathered. Now, the difference between them all is, I suppose, cost is a big thing, because the aluminium and the alu-clad would be quite expensive. It could be 50% more expensive than the PVC. And the reason people go for aluminium and alu-clad is, especially aluminium, people you don't need, the frame is quite thin on the aluminium windows, and people like that look, do you know? Now, as I said, they are more expensive, and the alu-clad as well. It's really a preference thing. Some people like the feel of a timber window on the inside, but they don't want to have the maintenance on the outside. So the alu-clad is on the outside, and that protects the frame, you know.
Okay, there's another message in from Caroline in Rathcoffey. She was just wanting to know about insulation. She said that you've touched on insulation there, but what is the best one to use? And if you have a timber frame home, can you use the pumping insulation? You know, where they pump the insulation into the walls?
Yes, so... I suppose typically the pumping insulation would be for block. So, and you see a lot of people using it on older houses. So, let's say a house that was built in the 90s, but they're trying to get their U value up to get a warmer house. They will get someone in to pump the walls. The guys come, drill holes all around the walls, and they pump in beads that kind of stick together, and just you get a better performing house. So, in timber frame, you can use spray foam, which is something like that. And look, I quite like spray foam myself. If you can imagine, there's 3 different types before I proceed on there. There's 3 or 4 different types. One is a PIR board, which is a solid board insulation. And it's kind of like, what would it be like? I don't know if you remember the insulation years ago. It was like the white foam stuff.
Styrofoam.
Yeah, the styrofoam. Look at it. It's a way better version of that, but that's kind of the solid insulation that I'm talking about. And then you have your wool insulation, which is another type, and then you have, your spray foam insulation. It doesn't matter how good somebody is at putting insulation into a wall. They're never going to get it as good as spray foam insulation. Like the spray foam guys land onto site, let's say a timber frame house, the timber frame walls are empty or nearly empty. There might be services in it like wiring and plumbing. The spray foam guys come in and they spray from head to toe of each wall, and the foam expands in the wall. So it's fitted perfectly, if you know what I mean. Whereas if you're trying to cut in a solid piece of insulation into a wall, there's human error involved. Nobody's perfect, you know. So there is that. We find that the spray foam does work typically well.
The woolen insulation then, is that fiberglass that's used mainly in the attic though, isn't it, that you'd still see it? Like even in our house, which is a relatively new house, I thought the days of the woolen insulation were gone, but ours is insulated with that in the attic.
Actually, no, wool insulation is getting better and better. So that's what you call loft wool that you have in your attic. And I suppose if you're buying a new aerated house at the moment, you'll probably have anywhere between 300 and 400 millimetres of wool in your attic. But let's say for timber frame, wool insulation is brilliant. It's breathable. It's on the go over 100 years, so it's trialled and tested for over 100 years. And also, you can get high-density wool for a timber frame wall. And the high-density wool is also fire retardant. So out of all the insulations on the market, the wool insulation is the only one that's completely fire retardant, up to like 1,000 degrees. So there's massive benefits to wool insulation, especially with timber frame. And I remember a few years back, we re-roofed an American log cabin in Donabate, and there was wool insulation used all around the log cabin, apart from one place. And the place that didn't have the wool insulation got scorched, and the wool insulation protected the rest of the log cabin, you know, so it really is good in that sense.
Never knew it was fire retardant, which is good to know, from a safety point of view. Speaking of the attic, by the way, Martina in Crookstown has texted in to say, if you're building a timber frame home, would you have less or more attic space than a block home, or is it the same?
Well, I suppose it's really down to your architect. If you're in an area that you're able to get a higher roof, you're going to have more attic space. Now, most of the time, like let's say 85% of the time, you'll have a good attic space. And if you plan your build well through the design stage, you have two options. You can ask your roof truss company or your carpenter to leave a storage space up in the attic, because sometimes the roof trusses look like a W, so that might mean that you wouldn't have that much storage space. Or if you wanted to move up there in years to come, you can then ask the roof truss company to create an attic space that's structurally you're setting it up for it's going to be used in a few years' time. So in a few years' time, you don't have to go back to the drawing board and get an engineer to come in and cut out that W in the middle of your roof and put in steel and do all the structural stuff. You can do that in the beginning.
And can it be converted then, the attic, in time, timber frame attics?
Yeah, yes, they can. Is the answer. The majority of them, you definitely can. But if you put the thought in before, in the design stage, and say, I'm going to move up here now in a few years' time, the structural work can be done now.
Right, okay. Maria in Newbridge says, would you recommend getting your house insulated from the outside?
I suppose this is typically done on older houses, so houses that was built in the 70s, 80s, 90s, so they're fitting insulation on the outside. It's quite a big market at the moment. There's over 1,000 companies in Ireland doing this actual job. On a new build, the only place that you would see this being done is through ICF. Now, ICF is an insulated block, which they build like Lego the whole way around, and they actually pour the concrete into it, so it's technically insulated on the outside. But I suppose I haven't seen a new build blocks and then insulate on the outside, but it is been done in other countries.
Okay, and if it is an older house, it's something that could be looked at being done, but would you recommend that they maybe have a look at some of the other options then, maybe pumping in the beads, or maybe the other styrofoam kind of thing that you mentioned as well?
Yeah, like if it was an older house, what I would say is I hear great reports back from people getting spray foam done in their attic. The spray foam, people that are kind of in a colder house, to get the guys in with the spray foam, as I say, it's a great way to make your roof airtight. And if you think of heat loss, heat is always travelling up. So if you can get your ceiling or your attic as airtight as possible, and the spray foam is great for that in the attic. On the outside, you have a couple of options. You can get your walls pumped, and you can also get that insulated board on the outside. So it is good for older houses, getting the insulation on the outside.
Final message then, Dave, this morning. It says, how often do you give maintenance to a timber frame house? Is this a job that can be done by ourselves or by another company? And any recommendations, as we have one timber frame house that was built in 2019. So how often does maintenance have to be done on that?
If it's a timber frame house, none of the timber should be exposed to the elements of the rain, wind and sun. So it shouldn't need any maintenance, really. The only time I've ever seen maintenance on a timber frame house is a roof leak. You know what I mean? Obviously, you're going to have to get your roof leak fixed. I suppose if there was a shower leaking for a long time, now, it'd have to be a long time. You might have to replace the timber around the wall of the shower, but that's the only time I ever see maintenance that has to be done on the actual structure of the timber frame house.
Okay, look, we'll have to leave it there. There's more that I want to talk about, kind of around insulation, windows, doors, all that. We'll have to come back to it next week, and if there's any other messages that come in the meantime, we'll return to them at the same time next Thursday. Remind us quickly about your information, how people can get in touch with you.
So we post quite daily on Facebook Facebook, which is Premier Timber Frame Homes, and then we're on TikTok and Instagram under my own name, Dave, Premier Timber Frame Homes. And if you want to get in touch with us directly, it's info@premiertimberframehomes.ie.
Spot on, Dave. Thanks a mil. We'll talk to you again at the same time next week.
Dave the Builder on KFM with Premier Timber Frame Homes, your expert guide to self-built homes. PremierTimberFrameHomes.ie.